Good evening, and welcome back to SleepWise. Tonight, let the room become simple again. Let the light soften. Let the phone rest. Let the day loosen its grip. Feel the weight of your body meeting the bed, the quiet pressure of the sheets, the small warmth where your hands touch. If there are thoughts still moving, you don't need to chase them. Just notice them the way you might notice wind outside a window, passing on its own. In our story, you're the keeper of a lonely lighthouse on a dark coast. Not a grand tower for tourists, but an old, steady place that has learned one skill very well: staying calm while weather changes. You have a lamp that turns in a slow circle and a logbook with pages that smell faintly of salt and paper. Each night, you make tea, check the glass for frost, listen for the sea's rhythm, and write a few quiet lines that help you understand what's happening. Anger for the brain is a kind of weather report. It isn't a moral failure, and it isn't proof that you're broken. It's a signal, a rapid message the nervous system sends when something important feels threatened or violated. Sometimes it's obvious, like a sharp insult or a clear injustice. Sometimes it's quieter, like being interrupted again or feeling unseen or having a plan blocked at the last moment. The brain has learned that certain moments matter for safety, for fairness, for belonging, for boundaries, and when they matter, it wants energy and attention, and it wants it quickly. Before your mind even has words, another part of you makes a quick decision. This is significant. This is the brain's early warning system, the one that taps you on the shoulder and says, "Pay attention." Only after that tap do explanations arrive. A story forms, a reason appears, and if the story points to harm or disrespect, the body begins to ready itself. That's why anger can feel so physical. The chest tightens, the jaw sets, the breath shortens, the mind narrows around one bright line of meaning. This is your body, preparing to move toward a problem and change it. Anger is often an approach state, not a retreat. It leans forward. It says, "Do something." But the lighthouse doesn't fight the storm. It reads it. So tonight, we'll learn the brain's anger system the way a keeper learns the sea. Slowly, patiently, with respect. We'll look at the older layers first, the parts that prefer speed. Then the newer layers, the parts that can choose. And all the while, we'll practice the keeper's art, noticing the signal without becoming the signal. In the logbook, the keeper has a simple method. One line for what happened, one line for what the body did, and one line for what you choose next, even if the choice is just to breathe and wait. Small words, written gently, can bring space back into the mind. Outside, the tide continues its quiet work. Inside, you turn to the first blank page and begin to write. The first line you write is small, almost nothing at all, but it steadies the hand. Outside, wind from the northwest, light spray, the sea restless, but not cruel. Inside, a warm mug, a quiet lamp, and the soft scratch of pen on paper. You listen for a moment, the way you might listen for your own breathing, not trying to change it, only to notice the pattern. The lighthouse beam turns, slow as a thought that has learned patience, and each time it sweeps the dark water, it reminds you of something simple. Signals are easier to understand when you watch them from a safe distance. Anger is one of those signals. In the brain, anger often arrives when something important feels blocked or violated. A boundary is crossed, a goal is stopped, a rule of fairness is bent. The mind may tell 100 different stories about why it happened, but the body tends to share one familiar message. This matters, and it needs attention. That message carries energy. Anger is not only heat and sharpness, it is also a push forward, an urge to correct the course of the world. Some emotions pull you back, urging caution and distance. Anger often does the opposite. It leans in, it straightens the spine, it narrows the view to the problem that must be faced. In evolution, that forward push had a purpose. If a rival took too much, if a neighbor ignored a boundary, if a group member cheated, anger helped you signal in a clear and costly way that you would not quietly accept it. It was a kind of inner negotiator rising to protect value, to ask for respect, to recalibrate how others treated you. But the modern mind doesn't live on open plains or in small camps where every conflict is face to face. Tonight, anger may rise for a clipped message, a sudden delay, a careless remark, an unfair meeting, a promise broken in silence. The triggers change, but the wiring is old, and it still runs on fast conclusions. You write again. What happened? A wave struck the rocks too hard, or a word struck the heart too fast. What the body did, it tightened, it warmed, it leaned forward, and then, quietly, the third line, what you choose next. The brain has a habit of deciding important before it decides true. First, it flags the moment, like a buoy lighting up in dark water. Only after that does it build meaning, searching for intent and blame, searching for a reason to match the feeling. That is why anger can feel so convincing. The signal comes first, and the story arrives in its wake. So the keeper's art is not to argue with the first signal. It is to slow down the second part, the meaning-making, just enough to steer. The beam passes over the water again, and you let your shoulders sink a little deeper into the bed, as if you too are being kept safe by a steady light. You turn the page, ready to listen to older layers of the storm. Outside, the wind thickens, and the sea makes a lower sound as if it has found a deeper instrument to play. You keep your eyes on the glass, watching tiny beads of salt gather and slide. The lamp above you does not hurry. It turns and turns and keeps turning. In the logbook, you begin a new entry with a thought that feels as old as bone. Some parts of the brain were built for speed. Long before language, long before maps and calendars, a nervous system that hesitated too long could lose food, lose shelter, lose life. So the older circuits learned to make quick, blunt predictions. Is this safe or not? Is this mine or not? Is this fair enough to tolerate or costly enough to fight? When anger rises fast, it often borrows from these older layers. Deep structures help the body mobilize, as if preparing for action before you've chosen what action should be. Signals travel downward to the systems that manage breath, heart rate, muscle tone, blood flow. The sympathetic system opens the valves, so to speak, and the body gets ready for effort. A little more oxygen, a little more tension in the muscles, a little less patience for delay. You can feel how intelligent that is in its own simple way. If a door suddenly slams in a storm, your body jumps before your mind explains. If a sharp word lands in the middle of a tired day, the chest tightens before any careful interpretation arrives. The brain would rather be early than perfect, because early kept ancestors alive. And yet, this speed has a cost. When the body mobilizes quickly, the mind can become narrow. Attention locks on a single detail. The world shrinks to one bright point, and everything else fades into the dark around it. You may notice it as a kind of tunnel. The urge to correct, to defend, to press, to win, not because you are cruel, but because an old system is doing what it was built to do. The brain also releases little chemical nudges that make action feel urgent. A faster pulse can make a thought feel louder. A tight chest can make a story feel certain. It is easier in that state to mistake readiness for truth. So the keeper writes what the storm is doing and also what the body is doing. Outside, gusts, sudden and cold, the sea slapping the rocks. Inside, jaw tightening, hands warming, breath shortening. Then comes the gentle reminder, written as if for the next keeper who will inherit this tower someday. Readiness is not destiny. A surge is not a command. The first wave is the brain preparing, not the brain deciding. Tonight, as you rest, you can practice the smallest form of freedom. You can notice the surge without feeding it. You can let the lamp keep turning while your breath takes one longer, quieter way out. The wind continues its work, and you, safe in the lighthouse, learn the difference between the storm and the shore. A little later, the storm shifts. The sound changes first, then the feel of it, as if the air has turned its shoulder and begun to blow from a new direction. In the lighthouse, you notice the smallest creaks of wood, the faint whistle at the window seam, the way the flame behind the glass seems to breathe. You dip your pen again and write the next entry. Outside, steady rain, no lightning, a patient gray moving through the dark. Inside, the body, speaking in sensations. One of the quiet wonders of the brain is that it is always reading the body, even when you are not. It tracks the rhythm of the heart, the depth of the breath, the tension in the throat, the warmth in the face, the settling of the stomach. This inner sensing is like weather awareness. You do not need to name every cloud to know if the air is heavy. When anger begins, the body often changes before the mind has finished its sentence. Heat rises in the cheeks. The hands clench without permission. The jaw presses as if it could hold the world together. These sensations are not the anger itself. They are the body's preparation, the early instruments of the storm. There is a part of the brain that pays close attention to these inner signals, gathering them into a felt sense of how things are. It helps stitch heartbeat and breath and tension into something the mind can recognize. And once the body feels stirred, the brain becomes more likely to interpret the outside world as urgent. A tight chest can make a delay feel like disrespect. A racing pulse can make a small mistake feel like a threat. When you notice the sensation clearly, you give the mind a map. Heat is not the whole ocean. Tightness is not the whole sky. It's just a reading, a number on the dial, and numbers can change. So the keeper's method is gentle and precise. You do not argue with the sensations. You simply record them as if they were the temperature and wind speed, warm face, tight throat, fast breath. And when they are written down, even in the mind, they become a little less mysterious. The storm is no longer everywhere. It has a shape. Tonight, you can try a small experiment, as soft as turning a page. Let your attention move slowly through the body. Notice where it is easy. Notice where it is tight. If you find a knot, you don't have to undo it. You only have to acknowledge it, the way a lighthouse keeper acknowledges fog. Then add one long exhale, not as a command, but as a suggestion to the nervous system. We are safe enough to slow. Outside, the rain keeps falling into the sea, and the sea keeps receiving it. Inside, your body can do the same. It can receive a sensation and let it pass. You write the last line of the entry with a kind of kindness. Sensations are signals, not orders. The lamp turns again, and the page dries under the warmth of the room. Near midnight, the storm calms for a while, and the quiet that follows is almost louder than the wind. The lighthouse feels hollow in a comforting way, like a shell that holds warmth. The beam keeps its slow rotation, and the sea, for a moment, sounds like a long exhale. You open the logbook to the next page. Outside, a lull, waves still moving, but less sharp at the rocks. Inside, the mind noticing mismatch. Anger often begins not with hatred, but with a small collision between expectation and reality. You thought the road would be clear, and it wasn't. You thought the promise would be kept, and it wasn't. You thought you would be heard, and you weren't. The brain is a prediction machine, always guessing what comes next. When the guess is wrong, it sends a signal. Something changed. Pay attention. There is a part of the brain that helps register this kind of conflict, like a bell that rings when two things don't match. It pays attention when the world resists your plan, when effort isn't rewarded, when a pattern breaks. In a gentle way, it is useful. It keeps you from sleepwalking through danger or repeating the same mistake. But in the middle of a tired day, That bell can ring too easily. The modern world is full of small mismatches. A delayed reply, a glitchy app, a meeting that runs long, a stranger who cuts in line. These are not life or death storms, yet the brain's conflict signal can still flash and the body can still prepare because the system was built to notice friction quickly. Often, the bell is paired with the body's weather reading, a ring in the mind, a tightening in the stomach, a quickening in the chest. The brain treats the mismatch as urgent, and it can switch your attention like a lighthouse turning toward a new patch of sea. This is one reason frustration is such a common doorway into anger. The moment the brain senses blocked, it begins to gather resources. Attention tightens around the obstacle. The mind rehearses what should have happened instead. And if the blockage feels unfair or intentional, anger adds its forward push, like wind filling a sail. So the keeper writes with care. What was the expectation? What was the reality? And what is the smallest true thing you can say about the difference? Sometimes the smallest true thing is simply something didn't go as planned. That is enough. You don't have to add a verdict. You don't have to add a story about what it means about you or them or the future. Tonight, you can feel how soothing it is to separate the bell from the blaze. A bell can ring without a fire. A signal can arrive without becoming a storm. Outside, the lull ends and the wind returns in a softer voice. Inside, you let your thoughts loosen. The lighthouse stands steady and quiet, and you turn the page toward the next layer of the mind. The next page opens with a faint crease, as if it has been turned many times before. The wind returns, not sharp now, but insistent, brushing the lighthouse with a steady hand. Somewhere below, a buoy taps softly, a small bell marking the edge of safe water. Outside, the weather shifting from friction to meaning. Inside, the mind searching for why. After the brain notices a mismatch, after it rings that quiet bell that says something is off, it often reaches for an explanation. Not a perfect one, not always a fair one, but a quick story that helps the nervous system choose what to do next. Was it an accident? Or was it intentional? Was it careless? Or was it cruel? Was it a simple delay or a sign of disrespect? These questions arrive so naturally that they can feel like truth itself. And the brain, wanting clarity, will often choose a single interpretation and hold it up like a lantern. This is appraisal, the mind's way of assigning meaning to what happened. The brain is not only feeling, it is also guessing. It predicts other people's motives, estimates future risk, and tries to decide which response will protect you best. In calmer moments, this meaning-making can be wide and flexible. You can hold more than one possibility. You can think, maybe they didn't see me. Maybe they're having a hard day. Maybe I misunderstood the tone. But when the body is already mobilizing, appraisal tends to tighten. The threat system becomes more influential, and the mind scans for intention because intention helps it predict what comes next. If you believe someone meant to harm you, you prepare differently than if you believe they simply misstepped. And so the mind searches tone, timing, facial expression, silence, reading between lines, sometimes too deeply. It's here that anger becomes so persuasive. The body says urgent, and the mind says justified. Heat and certainty travel together. A thought that might have been gentle becomes sharp. A question becomes an accusation. Not because you are destined to blame, but because the brain prefers a single map when seas are rough. So the keeper writes in a different way. What happened without interpretation? What I felt without verdict? What I don't know and can allow to remain unknown for now. That third line is a form of quiet power. It keeps the story from hardening too quickly. It gives the newer parts of the brain time to arrive, the parts that can steer and choose strategy, not just reaction. You can try it tonight, in the soft privacy of your own mind. When a memory of irritation appears, see if you can name the raw fact beneath it, a sentence with no heat. Then name the body's weather. Then add the gentlest phrase, I may be missing something. Outside, the buoy keeps tapping. Inside, the mind can loosen its grip just a little. The lighthouse beam turns, and the coast remains steady. A thin veil of fog drifts in, and the lighthouse light becomes softer at its edges, as if it is learning how to blur. The world outside feels quieter, not because it has changed, but because it is being held in mist. Outside, visibility low, sound close. Inside, anger touching something tender. For many people, anger is not the first emotion. It is the second. Underneath it, there is often hurt, or fear, or the small ache of being left out. The brain is a social organ. Long ago, survival depended on closeness, on being protected by others, on being counted as part of the group. So the nervous system learned to treat social signals as vital. A turn back, a cold tone, a forgotten invitation, a look that says, you don't matter. When the brain senses exclusion or rejection, it can activate circuits that overlap with the brain's pain alarms. Not metaphorically, but in the sense that similar warning systems help mark the experience as urgent and important. The body reacts as if to say, this matters for your safety, because once upon a time it truly did. And when that social pain is present, anger can rise like a shield. It covers the softer feeling with a harder one. It creates distance. It pushes forward. It tries to restore dignity, to regain footing, to stop the sting. This is why anger can feel confusing. The mind may be certain it is furious, while the body, underneath, is aching. It is also why a small comment can land like a storm. If it brushes an old bruise, if it echoes a familiar pattern, the nervous system responds as if history is repeating, even when the moment is new. The keeper understands this because the sea has layers too. A calm surface can hide a strong current. And if you only watch the surface, you might misunderstand the motion. So in the logbook, you write one line that is not about blame. What did I need right then? Sometimes the answer is simple: to be heard, to be respected, to feel safe, to feel included, to feel that your effort mattered. When you name the need, the anger becomes less like a fire and more like a signal flare, a bright light saying, "Something important is here," and then without rushing, you can decide how to respond. Not with force necessarily, but with clarity. Tonight, you can let your body settle as you imagine the lighthouse holding its circle of light. You can let your shoulders drop as if you are lowering a shield. You can let the breath become longer and kinder. Outside, the fog drifts past. Inside, the softer truth has room to exist safely beneath the calm turning beam. The fog thins and the stars return, scattered like quiet notes across a dark page. The lighthouse lamp sweeps the shoreline, briefly illuminating rocks, tide pools, and the edge of sand where the sea leaves its shining trace. Outside, the coast, a boundary drawn by water. Inside, anger has a boundary too. Humans have always lived in a world of trade-offs: time, food, attention, respect. These are shared and negotiated, sometimes gently, sometimes not. And the brain keeps track more than we realize of whether a bargain feels fair. One way to understand anger is as a recalibration signal. When the mind believes someone is treating your welfare as too cheap, interrupting, taking, dismissing, ignoring, anger rises to press for a change. Not always with shouting or conflict, but with an inner stance that says, "I count. I matter. This isn't acceptable." In small ancestral groups, this mattered deeply. Cooperation kept people alive, and fairness helped cooperation last. If someone could take from you without consequence, you would lose resources, status, safety. Anger helped communicate cost. It helped enforce boundaries. It helped stabilize group life by making exploitation less appealing. That ancient function still lives in modern moments. A colleague speaks over you. A friend breaks a promise. A stranger cuts in line. The mind may feel a sudden flare of heat, and with it, a quiet calculation. Should I let this pass, or should I correct it? The nervous system weighs these choices quickly, often using cues you don't consciously name. How safe do I feel? How much power do I have here? How much does this relationship matter? What will it cost to push back? What will it cost to stay silent? In this way, anger is not only emotion. It is also strategy forming at the edge of awareness, a push to be treated with appropriate care. The keeper writes with respect for this old intelligence, but also with restraint. What is the boundary? What is the desired correction? What is the least costly way to communicate it? Sometimes the least costly way is a calm sentence, spoken later when the wind has eased. Sometimes It is a quiet decision to step back. Sometimes it is a firm no delivered without cruelty. The lighthouse does not smash the waves. It marks the rocks so ships can steer. Tonight, let that be your image. Anger is the light that shows where the rocks are. You can use it to navigate, not to crash. Outside, the tide keeps drawing and redrawing the shoreline. Inside, you can let your boundaries be steady too, clear, simple, and calm. The storm returns in small bursts, not as one great roar, but as repeated knocks. Wind, then quiet. Wind, then quiet again. Each knock is like a hand on a door, and each pause is like waiting for an answer. Outside, gusts, impulses. Inside, the mind meeting obstruction. Frustration is one of the most common doorways into anger. It happens when the brain expects movement forward and finds a barrier instead. A traffic jam that shouldn't be there, a website that won't load, a conversation that circles without resolution, a plan delayed. Again, the brain is built to predict and pursue. It sets a goal, starts a sequence, and anticipates a reward. Progress, completion, relief. When that sequence is interrupted, a signal rises. Pay attention, adjust, try again. In moderate doses, this is useful. It helps you persist. It helps you learn. It nudges you to change strategy when the world resists. But when obstacles repeat, the nervous system can begin to treat the blockage as a threat. The body mobilizes, the mind tightens, and anger adds its approach energy, urging you to push harder against the door. Some parts of the brain act like quiet accountants, tracking effort and outcome. If effort is high and reward is low, the system flags it. Something is wrong. Something must change. Over time, that tally can make the smallest barrier feel heavier than it is. Not because you are dramatic, but because your brain has been asked to spend too much energy for too little return. This is why repeated small frustrations can create a surprisingly large mood, not because each obstacle is enormous, but because the brain keeps receiving the same message. Blocked, blocked, blocked. The signal stacks. The keeper's logbook offers a gentle alternative. What is the obstacle? What is within my control? What is a new path, even a small one? Sometimes the new path is stepping away for a moment, letting the body downshift so the mind can think again. Sometimes it is breaking the goal into a smaller piece. Sometimes it is accepting that tonight this door will not open, and there is no need to keep knocking. You can feel, even as you rest, how kind it is to stop arguing with a closed door. The lighthouse does not insist that the sea be still. It adapts to the movement and keeps its light steady. Outside, the gusts pass. Inside, you let your jaw unclench. You let your breath lengthen. You let the idea of progress become softer, more patient, more human. Then you turn the page and listen for the modern noises that so often pretend to be storms. The lighthouse stands where it has always stood, but the world beyond it has changed. On the horizon, far away, you can almost imagine a faint glow, a city's light reflecting off cloud and water, a reminder that modern life is never fully dark. Outside, distant brightness, restless air. Inside, an ancient system in a noisy age. The brain that makes anger is old, but the triggers of anger have multiplied. In earlier times, a conflict might have been one moment in a day, a dispute, a boundary, a resolution. Now, irritation can arrive in dozens of tiny forms, spread across hours, a stream of messages, interruptions, choices, demands. The nervous system is especially sensitive to novelty and uncertainty. Each new notification is a small question: do I need to respond? Each delay is a small mismatch. Why isn't this working? Each social comparison is a small evaluation. Where do I stand? Each interruption pulls attention like a quick gust at the window. None of this is tragic, but it is constant. And constant friction can keep the brain's "this matters" systems engaged, as if the weather never quite clears. When attention is repeatedly yanked outward, the mind has less space to recover. The body stays slightly mobilized, even at rest. The threshold for anger lowers, not because you are weaker, but because the system is tired. This is also why anger is often louder when sleep is thin, when hunger is sharp, when days are crowded. The brain's regulators need fuel and rest to do their quiet work. Without it, the older, faster layers take the microphone, and everything feels closer, louder, more urgent than it truly is. The keeper writes this gently, not as a scolding, but as care. What are my modern storms? What drains me, even when it seems small? What protects my baseline? Sometimes protection is simple. Fewer pings, a softer evening, a slower pace of reply. Sometimes it is a boundary around attention itself, like closing a door so the room can be quiet. Tonight, in bed, you can imagine the lighthouse as a promise you make to your own nervous system. A place that does not demand constant readiness. A place where the beam turns at one speed, regardless of the noise beyond the coast. Outside, the city glow fades behind cloud. Inside, you allow the world to become darker and simpler. You listen to the sea, you listen to your breath, and you prepare for the keeper's next lesson: how to steer the signal not by force, but by skill. The lighthouse has a small room just behind the lens where the gears turn and the light is guided. You can hear it if you listen closely. A quiet, patient mechanism that doesn't argue with the wind. It simply keeps the beam moving, predictable, one slow circle after another, as if time itself has learned to breathe. Outside, the storm still present, but no longer in command. Inside, the part of the mind that can steer. The brain that produces anger is not the same as the brain that chooses what to do with it. Anger can rise quickly like weather, but action is something else. Action is a decision even when it feels automatic. And the nervous system has layers that help separate a feeling from a behavior, a signal from a strike. Toward the front of the brain are systems that act a little like a navigator and a captain. They can hold a goal in mind, compare options, imagine consequences, and choose a response that fits the moment you're actually in. Not only the moment your body fears you are in. When these systems are online, you can feel anger without being swept away by it. You can say, I see the wave, and I will not crash into it. Anger, by nature, narrows attention. It puts a spotlight on the problem and dims everything else. The steering systems do the opposite. They widen the room again. They remember context. They bring back the future, the relationship, the cost. But they need a little space to work. And that space often begins in the body, with breath, with a softened jaw, with a signal to the nervous system that the ship isn't sinking. These newer networks can be slower, especially when the body is already mobilized. Yet they are also trainable. Every time you notice anger rising and choose not to feed the first impulse, you strengthen the pathway between signal and choice. You teach your brain that urgency does not always mean danger, and that danger does not always require force. The keeper writes this in the logbook with a kind of respect, because respect is what keeps old tools useful. What the signal was trying to protect, what the impulse wanted to do, what outcome I truly want, what I'm willing to pay for it. Not because the keeper is perfect, but because the act of writing turns chaos into shape. It gives the mind a third position, a place to stand that isn't inside the storm and isn't pretending the storm isn't there. And here is the gentlest truth. Regulation is not suppression. Suppression is pushing the weather down and hoping it stays. Regulation is learning to read it, ride it, and respond with skill. You don't have to pretend you're not angry. You only have to remember that anger is information, and you are the one who decides what to do with information. Outside, the beam sweeps over the water, painting the mist with light. Inside, you let your shoulders soften, as if your own inner gears have found their rhythm. You turn to the next page, where the keeper describes the smallest tool of all, the pause. A pause in the storm feels like a secret. The waves are still moving, but the air goes quiet enough that you can hear the lighthouse itself. The soft click of the turning mechanism, the faint rattle of a latch, the slow settling of wood. Outside, the wind waiting. Inside, the space between impulse and action. In anger, the brain often prepares a response before it has chosen a response. Words line up at the edge of the mouth, hands tense, as if they know what to do. The body leans forward, ready to correct the world. And yet, hidden inside the nervous system, there is a stopping skill, a brake that can interrupt motion midstream. This stop system doesn't remove the feeling. It simply creates a small pocket of time, a fraction of a moment where you can notice what is about to happen and decide if it belongs in the world. It's the difference between sending the message and saving it, between raising the voice and lowering it, between stepping toward the rock and steering around it. The brain uses this break in everyday life, even when you don't think about it. You stop at the curb, you keep a secret, you hold back a comment. In anger, the same mechanism becomes precious because anger is fast. Anger convinces you that speed is strength. The break reminds you that choice is strength. So the keeper writes a practice that looks almost too small to matter. Neuroscientists sometimes describe this breaking ability as a circuit in the right side of the frontal brain that can interrupt an action. The way a lighthouse keeper can close a shutter before a gust snuffs a flame. It often works together with regions that track the body's urgency, so the brain can feel the surge and still stop the hand. The goal is not to become slow in life. The goal is to become slow for one breath in the moments when speed would cost too much. When the surge arrives, do one thing first. Not solve, not argue, not prove. Simply pause. The pause can be physical. A hand resting on the table, a sip of water, a slow blink, a gentle shift of the tongue against the roof of the mouth, like setting an anchor. These are not tricks. They are signals to the brain that you are buying time. Then, in that borrowed moment, ask one quiet question. What happens if I do what I'm about to do? Often the answer arrives as a sensation, a tightening, a heaviness, a sense of regret already forming. Sometimes the answer is a calmer possibility. I can speak later. I can ask a clarifying question. I can name the boundary without burning the bridge. This is how the break becomes wisdom, not by shaming the anger, but by guiding it. Outside, the beam turns over dark water and the rocks remain where they are, indifferent and patient. Inside, you practice the smallest steering move in the human mind, a pause that keeps the ship intact. And when the page is filled, you turn to the next entry where breath itself becomes a tool. The lighthouse glass is cool to the touch. When you breathe near it, a soft fog blooms and fades, a brief cloud that disappears on its own. You watch it for a moment, and the simplicity of it feels like comfort. Outside, mist and wind moving through each other. Inside, breath and heart doing the same. Anger is not only a thought, it is also a body state. When the nervous system believes something is urgent, it shifts the rhythm of breathing, the pace of the pulse, the tightness of muscles. This is how the body prepares to act. And because the body and brain are in constant conversation, changing the body's rhythm can gently change the mind's rhythm too. Breath is one of the few doors you can open from the inside. A longer, quieter exhale can signal safety to the nervous system. It tells the body that the moment is not a chase, not a fight, not a cliff edge. Over time, this kind of breathing practice can make the anger signal less explosive, not because it disappears, but because the body doesn't leap as high at the first gust. Inside the brain, higher control regions send messages down into deeper systems that manage arousal and defensive readiness. They can encourage the body to shift from high mobilization into steadier coping. Breath is one of the simplest ways to support that shift because breathing touches both mind and body at once. So, the keeper writes it plainly, as if describing how to tend a lamp. There is a branch of the nervous system that supports rest, digestion, and recovery, and it listens closely to slow breathing. When that branch is invited online, the heart can ease, the gut can unclench, and the brain can stop treating every signal as a siren. In the logbook, the keeper adds 3 small lines. Outside, the weather. Inside, the body's weather. Between them, the breath, a bridge. When you feel the surge, lengthen the way out. Let the inhale come when it comes. But make the exhale a little longer, as if you are warming your hands with your own air. If the mind keeps trying to argue, you don't have to win. You only have to keep exhaling. Each slow release is a message. I have time. I am not trapped. I can choose. You may notice how the shoulders soften first, then the jaw, then the eyes. The world becomes slightly wider again, and the beam of attention is no longer locked on a single rock. Outside, the sea continues to move, but it sounds less like collision and more like rhythm. The lighthouse doesn't force the sea to calm. It offers a steady signal and lets the water find its own level. Tonight, you can do the same, one breath at a time. Inside, your breath becomes the keeper's quiet lever, turning down the wind just enough for the steering mind to return. The fog on the glass fades, the page dries, and you turn to the next entry, where the keeper learns to read the map twice, by lamplight. In the lighthouse, the map is never thrown away just because the first route looks difficult. The keeper knows to check it twice, to measure distance in calm light, not in panic. A storm can make a familiar shoreline look like a threat, and a foggy mind can do the same. Outside, the coast unchanged. Inside, meaning revised. Anger often brings a single story to the front of the mind. It says, they meant it. They don't care. This will never change. And because the body is already mobilized, that story can feel carved into stone. Reappraisal is the brain's quieter skill of reading the same moment in a different way. The brain is always making models of other minds. It guesses intention the way it guesses weather, using hints and history. In anger, that guessing can become rigid. The mind locks on to blame because blame feels like control. If you can name a villain, you can plan a defense. Reappraisal loosens that grip. It brings online circuits that support perspective taking and future thinking, so the brain can move from I must react to I can respond. Even a small shift in interpretation can change the body's state, because the body listens to meaning, not by lying to yourself and not by forcing forgiveness, but by expanding the set of possibilities. It's the difference between one narrow interpretation and a wider map. Sometimes reappraisal is simple. Maybe I'm exhausted and everything sounds sharper tonight. Maybe there is missing context. Maybe this is clumsy, not cruel. Maybe I can address it without attacking. Each maybe lowers the certainty that fuels escalation. This skill depends on the brain's ability to hold multiple ideas at once. It recruits the same kind of mental workspace you use for planning, perspective, and self-control. It also takes time, which is why the pause and the breath matter. They create room for the map to unfold. The keeper writes a gentle prompt into the logbook as if leaving it for a future self. What else could be true? What is the kindest interpretation that still fits the facts? What would I advise a friend to do? What outcome matters most tomorrow? These are not questions meant to erase anger. They are meant to aim it. Anger can carry a valid signal, even when the story around it is too harsh. When you widen the map, you can keep the signal and soften the damage. Outside, the lighthouse beam glides over the same rocks again and again, and the rocks do not take it personally. Inside, you let the mind glide too, over the memory of a moment that once felt sharp. You let it become less certain, less absolute, less final. And as the storm continues beyond the glass, you learn that the brain's greatest gift is not speed, but flexibility, the ability to see more than one path in the dark. After the storm's loudest hour, there is often a strange quiet. The wind drops, but the sea keeps moving. The lighthouse stands in still air, while the water below continues to roll, as if the ocean needs time to remember that the danger has passed. Outside, the thunder gone. Inside, the echo remaining. Anger has an afterlife. Even when the trigger is over, the brain can replay it, the tone of a voice, the unfair moment, the sentence you wish you had said. This replay is not just memory. It is the mind trying to finish the task. It wants resolution, safety, clarity. It wants to make sure it will be ready next time. Rumination can feel like preparation, but often it is reignition. Each replay reactivates the same systems that flag the moment as important. The body tightens again. The story hardens again. The nervous system treats an imagined conversation as if it were happening now, because the brain simulation tools are powerful. This is why the recovery period matters. The best regulation is sometimes not what you do during the surge, but what you do after, when the mind is tempted to keep the storm alive. The keeper's logbook becomes especially useful here because it gives the brain a container. Some researchers describe this as the brain updating its predictions. Each time you replay the scene, you're not only remembering, you're rehearsing. The emotional tone can be restamped, strengthened, made easier to trigger. But when you revisit the memory gently, with a calmer body and a wider map, the brain can store it differently, with less heat attached. In the lighthouse, the logbook has a shelf. Once an entry is finished, It rests there heavy and quiet among many other nights that eventually ended. Instead of replaying endlessly, you write the scene once in simple lines. What happened? What I felt? What I needed? What I will do next time? Then you close the book. Closing the book is not denial. It is a signal to the brain. The work has been recorded. The lesson has been stored. You can rest. If the mind tries to reopen the argument, the keeper does not fight it. The keeper returns to the lighthouse routines, checking the lamp, listening to the sea, letting breath widen the body. Sometimes the simplest phrase helps. This is the echo, not the storm. And if the replay still insists, you can offer it a time and place. Not now, in bed. Later, in daylight, for a few minutes, with a pen and a calm plan. The brain often relaxes when it knows it will not be ignored, but it also learns that night is for recovery. Outside, the sea gradually smooths itself, wave by wave. Inside, the mind can do the same. You let thoughts come, and you let them go, like foam dissolving back into water. The page turns softly, and the lighthouse keeps its slow, forgiving circle of light. In the early hours, the lighthouse feels like a living thing that has finally relaxed. The wind has moved on, but the air is still salted, and the sea keeps a slow, rolling memory of what happened. You sit with the logbook open, not because there is more to solve, but because there is more to settle. Outside, calmer water, long swells, a steady tide. Inside, the nervous system returning to baseline. This is the part many people miss. Anger is not only the flare, it is also the landing. The brain can handle a surge and still recover well, or it can linger in a half-alert state where everything stays sharp. Recovery is the quiet phase where the body rebalances and where the mind decides how much heat to store in the memory. After a provocation, the body often remains mobilized for a while. Stress chemistry doesn't vanish instantly. Muscles stay braced. Breathing stays a little high. Attention stays slightly narrowed, scanning for the next mismatch. If you move straight from one conflict into another, the system never gets to close the loop, and anger begins to feel like a constant climate rather than a passing storm. The lighthouse keeper learns to treat recovery as part of the job. When the weather breaks, you don't simply celebrate. You check the equipment. You wipe the glass. You let the gears cool. You give the whole tower a chance to settle back into its simplest rhythm. In the brain, recovery depends on a few gentle conditions. The body needs signals of safety, slow breathing, a softer posture, a quieter environment. The mind needs a sense of completion, a plan, a boundary, or at least a sentence that says, "For now, this is handled." Without those signals, the brain keeps the file open, and open files drain the system. So the keeper writes a small protocol, as simple as a recipe. 1. Return to the body. Notice the shoulders. Notice the hands. Notice the space behind the eyes. 2. Restore the breath. A longer exhale, repeated, until the chest no longer feels like it's leaning forward. 3. Close the story gently, not with victory and not with bitterness, but with a next step, a conversation to have tomorrow, a boundary to hold next week, a lesson to remember. When you do this, you are teaching your nervous system a valuable pattern. We can surge and we can come back. The storm is not permanent. Tonight, let the recovery phase begin in the most ordinary way. Imagine the lighthouse room cooling, the lamps turning, sound softening, the ocean's voice settling into a lullaby rhythm. Let your own body receive the same permission. Outside, the tide continues its faithful work. Inside, you allow your system to return to shore wave by wave without hurry. You are not erasing what happened. You are letting it find its proper size. A storm can be remembered without being replayed, and the brain can learn that rest is also a form of strength. Before dawn, the lighthouse has its quietest hour. The sky is still dark, but the blackness has softened as if it knows morning is on the way. You step closer to the window and see the sea breathing in long, even pulses. It reminds you of something your body also knows. Recovery happens in cycles. Outside, the night easing toward light. Inside, the brain's thresholds resetting. Sleep is one of the nervous system's oldest repairs. It is not just rest for the muscles. It is maintenance for emotion, for attention, for patience. When sleep is thin, the brain's alarms become louder. Small mismatches feel bigger. A clipped tone feels sharper. The body mobilizes faster because the system has less reserve. In the lighthouse, you can feel this truth. On a well-rested night, the wind is simply wind. On a tired night, the same wind can feel like a warning. The brain treats fatigue as vulnerability, and vulnerability makes it cautious, watchful, quick to defend. Anger rises more easily not because the world is worse, but because your tolerance for friction is lower. One reason is simple physiology. When you're sleep deprived, the balance between arousal and control shifts. The body has more trouble downshifting. The mind has more trouble widening the map. The braking system feels slower, the meaning-making feels harsher, and the echo after conflict lasts longer. So the keeper writes a note that sounds almost too practical for a story. And yet, it is one of the gentlest truths you can offer a mind. Protect the baseline. The baseline is the quiet foundation underneath all emotion. It is the nervous system's sense of, I can handle life, and it is built from ordinary things: sleep, food, water, movement, and the small pockets of silence where the brain is allowed to return to itself. In the logbook, the keeper lists the signs of a lowered baseline, the way you might list signs of fog, more irritation at small delays, more certainty about blame, more replay after the moment. less space between impulse and speech. These signs are not failures. They are weather warnings. They are the mind asking for maintenance. Tonight, you can treat sleep as a lighthouse service to yourself, a steady light you keep lit, not because you always feel like it, but because you know what it prevents. Good sleep does not remove anger from life. It simply gives the brain the strength to handle anger without being carried away by it. You let your eyelids feel heavier, as if they are lowering slowly like a shutter protecting a flame. You imagine your nervous system dimming its alarms one by one because morning will come and because your body is allowed to repair. Outside, the horizon begins to pale. Inside, you give your brain the simplest gift, permission to rest. And as you drift, you can trust that the quiet work of sleep is already beginning, like the sea smoothing its own surface. The first hint of sunrise is not a bright line, but a soft thinning of darkness. In that gentle change, you feel how the nervous system prefers gradual shifts. The lighthouse beam keeps turning, but it seems less urgent now, more like a habit of care than a warning. Outside, calmer air, faint light, the sea steady. Inside, a toolkit taking shape. The keeper's logbook is not only a record. Over time, it becomes a manual, not written all at once, but gathered from nights like this, when the weather taught something useful. You turn back a few pages and notice patterns, the way a scientist might notice patterns in tide charts. Anger rises fastest when the body is already strained, when attention is already split, when the mind believes there is no time to think. So the tools you practice are not complicated. They are small levers that give time back to the brain. The keeper writes them in a short list, each one a quiet sentence you can remember even when the wind is loud. Name the signal, not as a performance and not as shame, simply as recognition. I'm getting angry. Naming creates distance. It turns a wave into an object you can watch. Slow the exit. Let the exhale be longer than the inhale, a few times in a row. You're not forcing calm. You're telling the body it can soften. Delay the first move. If words are rising, let them wait behind the teeth for one breath. If fingers want to type, let them rest for a moment. The pause is the bridge between feeling and choice. Widen the map. Ask, what else could be true? Ask, what do I want the outcome to be tomorrow? Ask, is this worth the cost of escalation? These questions don't deny the boundary. They aim it. Choose the smallest clean action. Sometimes that action is a calm sentence. Sometimes it's stepping away. Sometimes it's writing a note in the logbook and returning later when the body is steadier. And then, after the moment, close the file. Write the lesson once, decide one next step, then let the mind rest like a lighthouse that does not keep searching the sea after the ship has passed. None of these tools are magic. They are training. The brain learns through repetition, through small successes, through the experience of, I felt the surge, and I still chose. Each time you do that, you strengthen the pathways that keep anger from becoming harm. You can practice right now, even in bed, even with no conflict at hand. Feel your breath. Name your state, calm, tired, drifting. Lengthen the exhale. Notice how the body responds. You are rehearsing a future version of yourself, the one who can meet a storm without becoming it. Outside, the sky lightens by another shade. Inside, your toolkit rests in your mind like a set of keys, small and reliable, ready whenever you need them. Quiet keys, kept close. Morning is close now. The ocean looks less like ink and more like slate, and the rocks below the lighthouse show their true shapes. In daylight, edges are clearer. You can see where the sea ends and the shore begins. You can see boundaries, and you can see safe passage. Outside, light returning, details visible. Inside, anger becoming information. One of the quiet aims of managing anger is not to become endlessly agreeable. It is to become clear. Anger often points to a boundary that matters. Time, respect, honesty, safety, fairness. If you ignore the signal completely, the boundary may erode. If you express the signal with too much force, the boundary may be defended, but at a cost. Trust, connection, peace. The lighthouse offers a middle way. It does not attack the sea. It does not retreat from it. It simply marks the rocks and guides movement. In human life, that guidance can look like calm assertion, a sentence that is firm but not sharp, a boundary that is stated without humiliation, a correction that aims for repair. The keeper writes a few examples, not as scripts to memorize, but as reminders of tone. When you interrupt me, I lose my thread. Can we slow down? I want to understand you, and I need you to speak to me with respect. I'm not okay with that. Here's what I need instead. I'm going to take a moment. I'll come back when I can talk calmly. These sentences carry the message of anger without carrying its heat. They translate the signal into direction, and then there is repair. Sometimes anger leads you to speak too fast or too sharply. Sometimes you choose a response that you regret. The nervous system is human. The brain is learning. Repair is how you keep one storm from becoming a climate between you and someone you care about. Repair does not require you to erase your boundary. It requires you to own your behavior and restate your need with clarity. I got heated. I'm sorry for how I said that. The issue still matters to me. Can we try again? I want us to be okay. And I also want this to change. When you repair, you are teaching your brain a powerful lesson. Conflicts can end. The file can close. Safety can return. This reduces the need for rumination because the mind no longer has to rehearse endless endings. In the lighthouse, you see the same truth in the sea. Even after rough water, the tide returns to its rhythm. It doesn't pretend the storm never happened. It simply resumes. So tonight, even as you drift toward sleep, you can hold this gentle promise. If anger rises, you can listen for the boundary. You can choose a clean response. And if you stumble, you can repair. That is not weakness. That is how the nervous system becomes wise. Outside, the horizon brightens. Inside, you let your own inner coastline become calm and clear, ready for the day, and safe enough to rest now. The sun has not fully risen, but the lighthouse no longer feels surrounded by night. There is a gentle blue in the sky, a soft certainty that darkness is temporary. The beam continues its slow circle, though now it seems less like a warning and more like a lullaby, a familiar motion that says, "You are held." Outside, dawn light, the sea steady, the storm far away. Inside, the lesson settling into the body. You close the logbook, and the sound is quiet and satisfying, like a door clicked shut without force. In its pages, you have not tried to eliminate anger. You have done something kinder and more realistic. You have learned to understand what anger is trying to do. It is trying to protect value. It is trying to defend a boundary. It is trying to correct what feels wrong. And sometimes it is trying to cover a softer feeling, hurt, fear, exhaustion, with a harder shell. The brain built this system long ago, when speed mattered. It still uses the same old weather instruments: body heat, tightened muscles, narrowed attention. It still flags moments as important before it explains them. It still reaches for meaning, for blame, for certainty, because certainty helps it act. But you also carry newer instruments. You have the pause, you have the breath, you have the ability to widen the map. You have the ability to choose a response that serves your future, not only your surge. And you have the ability to repair, to close the file, to return, to calm. That is what the lighthouse keeper knows. The sea will always move. Storms will always come. The task is not to control the ocean. The task is to keep a steady light and to remember where the rocks are so you can navigate without crashing. Tonight, as you lie in bed, you can imagine the lighthouse behind your eyes, a steady glow in the mind. When a gust of irritation arrives in the coming days, you can picture the logbook opening just for a moment. One line for what happened. One line for the body's weather. One line for what you choose next. And then you can close it again. And the most hopeful part is this: the brain learns, not in one heroic moment, but in small repeats. Each time you pause before replying, you strengthen the link between feeling and choice. Each time you lengthen an exhale, the body remembers safety. Each time you soften certainty into possibility, the mind widens. Over time, the storm still arrives, but the coastline feels steadier. And when you protect your sleep, you raise the threshold, so fewer small waves feel like emergencies. Feel the mattress supporting you. Feel your breath moving like a slow tide. Let your jaw soften. Let your shoulders drop. Let the day release its grip, the way the sea releases a wave back into itself. The beam turns, the gears hum quietly, and everything in you is allowed to become simple. Good night.